Speaking of books, even though we kind of got off books there. Speaking of books, I actually have an announcement to make officially. I have been working on a project for a minute now, and it's underway. So I submitted a manuscript late last year, on October or so, and I was spending a lot of stuff then trying to get some this feedback more than anything else on my writing, and I submitted one of my manuscripts to a publisher, and just to see what would happen. And I'm like, okay. Well, a month goes by, and they say, hey, we want to accept your manuscript, and they offer me a deal, and I'm like, okay, all right, here we go.
You're
And
gonna
so
submit something dumb.
yeah. So I actually have a book in the works right now. It's being published. It's a children's book, and it's going to come out probably late this year or early next year. I'll give you more updates as time goes on. But it's in the progress. We got the cover art. I got the cover art the other day.
Sweet.
Looks pretty good. I'm going to have them change some things on it, but it looks pretty good. I'll show it to you before you leave. But yeah, so big news, guys. Got a book coming out here in the future.
Your own
So
little baby. You're gonna have to go on maternity leave.
yes, I'm going to have to go to across the country, whatever. But it's been an
You
interesting
take, like, a little
process.
photo
so-
shoot with your when they give you the what do they call the first print?
Yeah.
Or
The first print.
there's like a word. No, wait. There's like a word for the first edition or something
Yeah.
like that. Before they actually put it out, and you can do like a little newborn photo shoot. That'd be funny.
So I'll get a lot of books personally that I'll sell you for, a price. But
Okay.
I'll give you a book. I
I'll
actually,
trade you Shepherd for. Not kidding. I'll trade you my first edition for your first edition.
I think I can get more for your first edition organs than you can for my books. So we'll see. But stay tuned for that and more info on that. It's pretty exciting, pretty cool.
It's really exciting.
Pretty big life change, and we'll see what happens. So it's only going to continue on if you buy the book. So please help us out there. And whenever I start pushing it out more,
And in 30 years, people can analyze this book versus like the next one you write. And they'll
Yeah.
be like, you know what happened in
and I
his
have
life?
other
He
stuff
used
in the
to-
works, so other projects going on. So we'll see what happens. But anyway, coming next, we have the conversation. All right, guys, before we move on, though, we have a word from our sponsor today. And the question is, do you wish the media had a nose problem like Pinocchio? Every time there's a light, it extends a little further and further and further. Well, thanks to our new sponsor, they can. All right? The folks over at The Nose Knows have made a brand new app and web extension for your devices to apply to your phones, computers, whatever else. With its advanced AI technology, in real time, it scans every word the pundit is vomiting up, and they says it's speaking truth or not. And if it's speaking truth, the nose goes. But if they're lying through their veneers, guess what happens? The nose grows. So download The Nose Knows today on all your devices. All right, guys, welcome to the conversation today. And it's going to be a good one, hopefully.
Yeah.
That's always the goal
Always
anyway.
the hope.
Yes. So we were discussing what we wanted to talk about today, and one thing that I think stuck out in our back and forth was talking about how no one is going to
Do it
make
for
things happen for you. Basically, no one's going to save you. No one's going to make you grow. No one's going to make you do anything. You got to do things for yourself. So, what was kind of your initial line of thought there, Heidi?
Yep. I just think people that are listening to this, you may feel a call of God in your life to a certain ministry, or you might feel a certain direction that He's gifted you for, maybe a career path or way to serve, or just kind of a vision for your life. And that's exciting and that's good. And I'm glad God gave you that vision. But nobody is going to make you become that. Nobody
Right.
can. Nobody can do the homework for. I mean,
And I think a lie that the enemy tells you at a young age is that someone is going to.
yeah.
Like, I think you feel that way sometimes, like, because you have parents, and your parents make you brush your teeth, make you grow yourself, make you
And
make your
sometimes
bed.
the lie is that it will just happen organically. That somehow
Sure.
it will just. I think maybe because we live a generation where there are no, especially when you're younger, there's no real dramatic consequence if you don't do something. You know, if you miss your potential, you can still skate by, you know.
Sure. So the middle age is not going to die from scurvy or something like that. You're just
Yeah,
going
I just think, you know, in a video game, if you mess up, you always get to restart.
to, yeah.
There's always later, there's always tomorrow, I can always do it. We kind of get stuck in this mentality. And this is something that God's been dealing with me about. If God gives you a certain direction and a place to go to, in any area, whether that's education or career or family or even, you know, the way you deal with people, the way you speak, things like that. If God gives you conviction about something, it doesn't change on its own, and you're
Right.
not going to get there just coasting along, and no
Yeah.
one is coming to do it for you. Truly,
You know,
no
I
one
think
can make you anointed or.
I didn't go to public school, but I went to college, and I think it's similar. You can kind of help me on this a little bit if I'm wrong, but usually you're kind of given, you have your parents, but you also have like advisors and professors who are kind of incentivized to make you
Yes.
succeed or help you at least
Yes.
pass. Maybe not succeed or be great, but at least pass.
Make it, yeah.
Yeah, at least get the C average, get out, move
Yeah.
forward, you know. And I think that hurts way more than it helps.
I agree.
In this area because, like you said, there's no consequences really. Have direction they want to go down, but
Right.
the struggle is, okay, someone help me get there, not
Right.
what do I got to do to get there. It's, okay, someone come hold my hand and take me there. And we all, and I'm talking about myself too. We've all been there. We've all struggled with that. We've all been there and done that. It's definitely not an easy thing to. It's natural, I think, a little bit. Look at Adam and Eve. Eve wanted the devil to give her the knowledge, give her the understanding of man's wisdom, and he tricked her in a sense. But she desired that too. She saw the fruit. The fruit was to make one wise. And she's like, hey, I want wisdom. So this will help me with my life. So help me keep going. God's like, I already gave you the plan, the purpose, the steps, but there's boundaries involved with that. And in order to get where you need to go, you have to have boundaries to get there. Mm-hmm. And boundaries aren't the same to keep things out. Sometimes boundaries are to keep things in. A fence isn't just to keep things out. A fence is to keep things in as well. But if there's nothing that's keeping things in or out, that's where you start having problems. And then it's an open flow, which in the spirit's great. But when it comes to actual things to do with your life,
Right.
it may not be so great.
So there's an example I'd like to use, and I totally agree with that. I think and I had kind of alluded to that earlier. I think the school system gets you so used to, well, I don't know where I'm going or how to get there, but somebody's going to help me.
Right.
Like somebody's going to tell me everything I need to know for this test. When we were finishing school, the last few years of high school, quite literally, before every test, our teachers would say, here's what you need to know, here's the answer.
Yeah.
And then we would just memorize that, and then on the test, just spit it back out, you know. So there was no, what?
And not to interrupt you, but we still have that.
Oh, yeah.
But we got to engage in that first. I think is the key there. Like we can go to God and ask. God will tell us, but it takes prayer to get there. God doesn't just come to us and say, do this. It's like
Sure.
we got to seek it out for ourselves. But keep going.
And, yeah, I think we didn't have to have a desire to be great. We didn't have to care. We just literally, bare minimum, you just had to show up and listen and just memorize, and that was it.
Yeah.
You know, and there was not very much work involved. And so I do think that kind of sets you up for failure. And that's not necessarily their fault that they do that. They're held to requirements. But so apply that to your spiritual walk. You feel a call of God to be a Bible study teacher, or a Sunday school leader, whatever
Yeah.
God gives you a vision for your life. Well, before you can get there, what is your character looking like? What does your
Sure.
personal devotion look like?
Sure.
Nobody comes and does those things for you. What
You
is
know, I
your
think-
speech, how you speak to people?
I think even before that, back to, these, a lot of times teachers will see stuff in you and they'll try to get you to that place. They see some potential in you, they'll kind of invest in you more. And your spiritual leaders want to as well, but a lot of times they want you to recognize it in your life first
Sure.
and come to them. And they may have an open door for you, but they want you to come through the door first.
Right.
And, if you feel a fivefold ministry call on your life and you acknowledge it, you need to go to your pastor and say, hey, pastor, here's what I feel, and let him confirm it in you. And then that opens the door for more investment. Because your pastor wants you to come to him and say, hey, here's what I feel. Because your pastor is not going to call you for you. He may see it in your life. But he's not, if he doesn't know you see it or not, he's not going to just say you're called to this and you feel like I have to. He wants you to say, hey, here's what I feel. Then he can confirm or deny, I guess, and say, hey, maybe not. Right. And then from there, at that point on, then you can really start walking. Then he knows I can start investing in this person more. Yeah.
Well, I think if there's no, even if just you think of a teacher, if that student has zero desire, then I'm going to waste my time.
Sure.
And so, and that leaves room for there to be a lot of disagreement and strife in that relationship. And I think that's the case with your pastor too, like, or leaders in your life. If there's zero desire and you feel like you're just being dragged along sometimes, or you don't want to do the work, like that's.
Well, and a lot of times too, one thing you have in school as well, as we use this analogy even more, is you have due dates. Get this done by here. But a lot of times when you get advice from your man of God, from your leader, they don't necessarily give you, they may sometimes, but a lot of times they say, hey, you should do this, you should work on this, do this. And you're like, great, I'll do that. Later. But there's no due date. Yeah. And so you know what you need to do, but back to our original point, no one's going to make you do it. Yep. They may or may not check back in. They may just say, hey, it's in their hands. When I see the growth, I'll come back to them. Or hey, when they come back, when they finish it, they'll come back to me. There's no due date. Right. If you want to grow, you got to give yourself your own due dates.
Yeah. And I think in another aspect of this, you had mentioned boundaries. I think as a young person, this is where this is critical. Mm-hmm. Because as an adult, you do get used to, okay, I do have to do this all on my own. Like, I got to pay rent or whatever by a certain date and figure out all these things. But when you're a teenager, sometimes it feels like, well, my parents should be setting these guardrails in my life for me. Yeah. That's their job. And in a sense, it is. Yeah. That is your parents' role as your authority. However, I think there may be some things that your parents don't even recognize that you deal with or don't even recognize to put a boundary up.
Sure. So, and also, as you get older, too, they may let you make more decisions just to see, because they're going to let you grow.
Because they're teaching you how to discern for yourself. And so my parents did not ever put any kind of boundaries on my phone use, on my internet access, on my music, anything like that, because they didn't. My dad goes to the AT&T store to figure out how to turn his phone on. Like, that's why. No, I mean no disrespect. He's brilliant in other areas. He's just old, whatever. So they didn't put any kind of restriction there, and ever. And so when I was wanted to please God, and I felt like I had a call of God on my life, and I wanted to, and I felt the conviction, I don't need to be spending all this time on the internet. I don't need to be watching YouTube all the time. I had social media at the time. I think I was like 14. And
14 on Heidi was crazy.
Which is crazy. And thank God it can be scrubbed forever. So, and I remember that was at a time where God was beginning to separate me from a friend group that I was in and really starting to call me to separation and learning him and knowing him. And so when the preached word came across and it was talking about, you need to consecrate and there are things that God will ask of you, I felt, oh God, I need to give up this Instagram account and this Twitter and this whatever. I need to quit doing these things and reading whatever.
Vine back then probably, maybe. I don't know.
What?
Vine back then probably.
No, it was like.
Before Vine, huh?
That was before Vine. Yeah. And it wasn't, it was, I think it was just Instagram. And it was already a big thing back then. And I remember, it was just, and YouTube. I do remember YouTube too.
Like Snapchat was big back then as well. But.
Yeah, I didn't Kick. Do you remember Kick?
No.
Oh, Kick. Okay, so, but I remember feeling, I've got to get rid of, this is a time waster for me. And I feel like God is asking, I don't need to have this. And so my parents never set the boundary for me. But I decided, I'm going to get rid of all of these accounts until I'm an adult. Yeah. And I'm not messing with any of this stuff until I'm an adult. Were they inappropriate? Not really. It wasn't really that. It wasn't sin, quote unquote. But it was something that I felt like God had asked me to get rid of. Yeah. And so nobody could do that for me. My parents could have set a boundary and come in and said, we're going to take this all away. And they did. In relation to a conversation, people that I was talking to, they said, you're not allowed to talk to that person. They drew a line for me. But at that time, this was before I really felt a call from God. This was in my rebellious era. At the time, when they cut that relationship off, you know what I did, Caleb? I had an old Kindle. This
Yeah.
is an OG Kindle. This is in 2012. And I took my Kindle, figured out how to get internet access on my Kindle, figured out how to find my email so that I could email this boy that I wanted to talk to
Yeah.
on my Kindle. And so it wasn't about, so even, the thing is, people could maybe draw boundaries, but that's not the point. You've got to learn how to draw the
Yeah.
boundary and have that conviction for yourself.
You know, your parents, your pastor, initially are going to draw the basic lines for you.
Yeah.
They're going to draw, here's the basic lines.
You
Here's
don't light houses on fire
you
beyond by 11.
you know, here's you got to stay here, even spiritually, even protecting wise. They're going to draw some basic lines for you. Here's what the church does. Here's what we do at the house. Here's your basic lines. Now, at that point, you have a choice. Do you follow them? You not follow them? That's still your choice. But then there's other boundaries you got to draw. Make yourself. And as you're called deeper, like you were, as you're called further into His kingdom, into your purpose in life, there's going to be times when God says, draw the line. And one of the things that is killing the culture today is trends and popularity and fitting in, which has always been there, but now it's global to an extent. It's on your phone. It's not just going to school. It's literally you're at home by yourself. You're seeing all the trends, and you feel a desire to measure up in everything, in clothes, the style, the music, whatever else. And it's always been there. It's always been a part of every new generation. But with each iteration, it gets more and more easier to get to, and I feel like more and more pressure to live up to it as well.
Yeah.
And it's made its way into the church too. The church has its cool people. The church has its way of doing things, and it's not bad at all. I'm not saying it's bad, but it doesn't mean it's for you. Because sometimes even with things in the church, God says, "Hey, I want you to draw a boundary here." And again, some of those may be drawn by pastors or leaders over different congregations, and that's fine. It doesn't mean anyone's sinning or doing anything wrong. But what it does mean is when God speaks to you personally, and the line God gives you goes against what is normal, even around some of your peers who are good and godly, you have to make a decision to draw the line.
Yeah.
And that's not an easy decision, but you got to draw the line, and you got to stick to the line. You know, a boundary is something that it makes boundaries, but if you have a gate to your boundary, it's
Not a boundary.
I mean, it's with no lock on it, especially.
Yeah.
You know, what do you expect to happen? And so we've all been there in our growth. God, I've been there. I remember I was doing the phone thing, and I would have a boundary to a certain extent, but I do the backgrounds, the way around it.
Yeah.
So because my heart, I wanted to have the boundary, but I wanted to let the temptation win sometimes too.
Yeah.
I wanted both. I could show, hey, I had the app on my phone, but I also knew how to get around the app if I wanted to.
Yeah.
And so the boundary, and I hadn't put the app on my phone, and the boundary was there, but I let myself have gates in it.
Yeah. And no one was able to fix that for you.
Right.
Truly, no one can strong arm you into
Anything.
anything. You have to be able to draw that line, and don't say, "Well, my parents should have XYZ." No, ma'am. You need to take responsibility.
Yeah.
I think.
And your parents tried, probably.
Yeah, but they cannot strong arm you. What's going to happen when they're not around? That's the point. It's got to be from your heart too.
Yeah.
And I think knowing maybe where some of your
the principle, the prophecy from Azusa Street, they'll worship a God they don't know.
yeah.
It's what's knowing is what makes so where your treasure is, show me your treasure in our shirt. What's the word? Heart. Oh, I just went blank.
What?
The treasure out of the mouth.
Out of the abundance of your heart,
Yeah.
it speaks.
And so today we see what you're speaking.
Yeah.
And we've all been on Instagram. We know what you're speaking. We know what boundaries you haven't set.
Yeah.
And I'm not talking about slaying either. I'm talking about the principles and the ideologies and the mindsets you're speaking.
Yeah.
It's forming in your mind because you've not put boundaries up to protect yourself from those thoughts. And again, boundaries are two ways. Keep things out, keep things in. And when you have a boundary up and says, I'm going to keep the word inside me, in my life. I'm going to let the word be strong in my life. I'm going to know the word. I'm going to study the word. I'm going to get in the word and keep a fence around things that pulls away the word from me, so I don't lose the word at some point. Now, I have a fence of it. I can't. This is my time for the word. I'm growing in the word, and the word is so important because out of the heart, the mouth speaks, and I can tell what someone's boundaries are.
Yeah.
And not just by the slang. I'm not about slang, whatever. That's somewhat cultural. It's going to change over time. But the principles, the ideas you're speaking,
Yeah.
you're implying, I can see what the boundaries are or not.
Yep.
And everyone else can too. You know, your parents aren't stupid. Your pastor's not stupid. And they may not know why you're saying that word, but they know if that word's bad or not. Or if that idea is bad or not. They may not understand where you're getting it from, but they know you're getting it from somewhere. And the thing is, God has called you and made you for something greater. And if you feel a call in your life, there comes a point where you have to make some hard decisions. Mm-hmm. And your parents may say, hey, listen, we don't care what you do here. Like, we're okay with either way. It's not a sin, it's not wrong. But God's saying, I want you to give some more time to me.
Yeah.
I want you to quit doing this thing. And you have a choice to make. Do I make the boundary? You know, even with voices in your life, there's boundaries. Mm-hmm. You know, we graduate high school, and literally everyone has advice for your future when you graduate high school. Everybody does. And they're all good intention. No one's doing anything wrong. But you hear a lot of different opinions. All of them have good, hopefully all of them have good motives behind them or good, even ideas behind them.
Yeah.
But who are the most prominent voices in your life? And do you have boundaries with the voices in your life? And is your pastor one of those voices in your life? And is his voice a boundary for your life? Because if he says it, does that set a boundary for you? Or do you say, well, that's outside my boundary line. That's fine. I'm not going to worry about what he says. Or I'm going to make it fit my way of living. Because it comes a point where, especially as you grow in leadership and ministry, and you start going to more and more meetings or behind the scenes stuff or more hard meat teaching towards ministry, towards your calling, they're going to give you more boundaries, or they're going to challenge you to go further than you ever before. And you have a choice there. Do I let them continue to draw boundaries in my life, or do I go back to the old boundaries and stay there and be safe? I keep doing what I want to do, living how I want to live, and not go to the deeper level.
And I think anything that God asks of you, any boundary that you have to, if it's friends, I do remember that time when God was separating me from some influences and some friends, and they weren't bad at all. Just like you said, it wasn't sin. They weren't bad at all. But even in the church, God was taking me on a different path. And eventually, the heart did come to fruition. They did wind up making their own decision and going down a completely different path.
Yeah.
But when that was happening, it was very lonely. And I remember feeling like, I think I made the wrong choice. You know, I think God's asked this of me, and this isn't fair.
Sure.
But shortly after that, I had so many good, deep relationships that I still have to this day. Maybe not so many, but quality over quantity.
Yeah.
Good relationships that I still have to this day that encourage me in my walk with God, that are, you know, we're all in ministry together, and it's exciting. And so I just feel like no matter what God asks of you, He will always restore over and above what He asks you to give up. I also, I think there's a level of just trusting God when it comes to certain boundaries, because, you know, when I was 13 and 14 and I felt like I needed to get rid of social media until I was an adult, everybody had social media at that point already. And it was kind of a weird, it's kind of like you think of Samson and his Nazirite vow, like what a weird thing. You can't eat grapes and you don't cut your hair. Like what a weird thing. But
you go to funerals, you know.
You look back later and see that God totally had His hand in it, because I was just reading a book. I'm in the middle of this book right now called The Anxious Generation, and it's talking about social media use and the rewiring of brains. And he has a whole chapter talking about puberty for boys and girls when they go from like 12 to 15, that age range, whatever they consume wherever they are, media, voice, advice, culture, where you live. Like, say you were raised in Japan your whole life, but during puberty you moved to America, you are American. Like, something about that period in your life is a critical time.
Interesting.
What you listen and take on is who you become during that
Wow.
time. And so what they have found with that is that if you use social media from the age of 11 to about 15, like, they go through puberty at different times, obviously,
Sure.
but during whatever. If that's what you are consuming, that is rewiring your brain, and there are effects that will be with you the rest of your life.
Wow.
In terms of how you view yourself, competition, comparison, all kinds of different effects on you. And so when I was reading that, I was like, so I narrowly avoided being one of those statistics because God knew, and God was sparing my heart and my brain, honestly, from those things. And so at the time, there was no science about no social media use until 16 or 17.
Sure, yeah.
There was no science about it, but now there is, and we're seeing it wasn't just parents making things up or leaders making things up just to say it.
Yeah.
There is hard science behind
No, for
social
sure.
media, and there's nothing wrong with. You can wait till you're 16, 17. I promise you'll know how it works. It just was interesting when I read that, and I thought God really did know. Even, of course He knows, but that provision, and so it just reminded me when God asks you of something, asks something of you, He sees the whole picture.
Right.
And He sees where you're going to be in 10, 20, 30 years. And those things may seem silly, or they may seem like a hard boundary to keep. And why do I have to do this when everybody else is doing their own thing?
Yeah.
Trust me, God knows. And there's purpose for it. And in 10, 20 years, your future family will thank you. Your future spouse will thank you.
For sure.
The depths you can go in prayer and knowing the Lord that you'll never see otherwise. God is so faithful, and He sees the big picture, and He's good at being God. He's good at what He does.
Amen. So good. So good. And kind of on a last note.
Last note, nothing.